we're going to have a panel discussion on what is it like when it comes to hotel investments in Africa. What is really the inside story? What is really the good, the bad, and the ugly? And this panel discussion is going to cover some important issues. I'm going to read out a few very important issues. And we've got a stellar panel even to discuss these very important issues. Number one, hotel performances across the southern and eastern Africa. Well, we're here in South Africa, so when we're looking at hotel performances, what exactly do we want to quantify? Corporate-centric nature of hotel demand in sub-Saharan Africa. So yes, investments is good, hotels are good, but is there really a demand? Is there really a market for more hotel development in the region? Cross-border investment. Is the movement of goods, services across borders, is that going to be easy to do, or is it going to be a complicated legal hurdle? Regulatory challenges and disparity across the region. Last year in Design Mission Africa, one of our biggest summits, one of the speakers, Nana Kwame Bediako, actually mentioned this. You look at South Africa today, you take a 6-hour flight to somewhere in the middle of Africa, there's a stark difference. There's a stark difference between South Africa and just a country just a few hours away. So, regulatory challenges across the region. And are there any legal issues that one would encounter? And if there are, what are the alternatives to overcome those legal issues? And as I said, we've got a very interesting panel to discuss these important issues. Our moderator will be Mr. Meelis Kuuskler, who's the founder of HD Partnership. Meelis, are you in the house at the moment? Yes? Oh, yep. Can we please have a special big round of applause for Meelis? And I'll tell you why. Well, number one, Meelis was here last year as well. He gave us a very nice case study. Number two, at 3 o'clock in the morning today, Meelis gets on the flight to come here. At 3 o'clock in the morning. Obviously, he's not slept. He came from Tanzania. Yeah, came from Tanzania. And he's here just a few hours later. And he looks as fresh as a daisy. Still. And you probably got on that flight at 12 or earlier?
Yes.
Yeah, somewhere around that time? Yeah.
Absolutely.
To present the perspectives from an investor's point of view, we have Mr. Dirk Brink, who is the COO of Master Asset Investments. Mr. Dirk, can we please welcome you on stage? From an owner's point of view, we have Mr. Franz Gmeiner, who is the CEO of the Orion Group. From an architect's point of view, we have Mr. Zinon Marinakos, who is the MD of DSA Architects, yes? And we are going to be joined by Vere, who is a little late. She'll be here any minute. Vere Shaba, who is the director of the Green Building Solutions. She'll be here any minute now. She's going to present from, sustainability point of view. Give her perspectives from a sustainability point of view. So she'll be here any minute. But for the time being, Meelis, it's over to you.
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. As it's been mentioned, I just arrived about 10 minutes ago. I haven't had my coffee yet. I changed my clothes and apologize in a disabled toilet. And hopefully I'm going to be ready. But let's get straight away started. Let's just sit next to him and let's make it comfortable. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself very, very quickly. I'm based now in Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam, but my career has been taking me through Europe, Middle East. I lived in London for 12 years and then 8 years in Dubai. And what I do is I do conceptual developments on the financials, on the design side, working with investors, with hotel brands, and anybody who has any interest in the hospitality industry and overall development. I'm so proud to have such an excellent panelist over here. I studied them on my way to airport about 2 o'clock this morning, and now we had a quick kind of a chat. I know a little bit more about them. I'd like to have them, first of all, just give all of you a chance to answer one question and also introduce yourself to audience. And I start with with Dirk.
Yes.
Yeah, getting the names always wrong. You are based in Kampala.
I'm based in Kampala, and we have a company out of Hong Kong and Guangzhou that does development for prospective owners and for ourselves.
But your background, as I found out, you are all through hospitality operations. You've been working with Starwood. You've been working with the major brands.
That's right. I worked for Starwood. Nowadays we have to call them Marriott, and Intercontinental.
The question for you then is what drives the big brands to enter the African market, and what are the kind of key inspirations to come and find out what's happening in African market, how they find the locations, and for instance, looking at Uganda, Rwanda, the landlocked countries, that means their population is short. There is not that many attractions. What they're receiving tourists is not the big numbers. Why they want to come down here?
I think that the big brands, and you see them coming in big numbers lately, but not, and I really underline the word lately, I think it was ignorance on Africa, fear, high risk, and they now come to see that this is not really true. Many countries, and most of them in Africa, are extremely stable, have a good economy, have a good growth. Inflation is somehow kept into line wherever possible. So yeah, they're now on the bandwagon and come in where they think, yes, there is business to be done. One of the examples is that we just opened, as owners now, the Marriott in Kigali. We're having a project in Kampala as well. Ramada is coming up. There are many chains, Radisson, that really push into Africa. And yeah, and the first one is the first one to get the best space, obviously.
All right. Your hotel is I was on the opening. It's an absolutely grand and beautiful hotel. How they're doing so far then? How they're doing so far?
It's
Marriott is open.
Well, Kigali is a particular place in the sense that they have built a fantastic conference center, which obviously has to be built. It's a government-owned entity, and they do an extremely good job there, be it the revenue or very, very good job to get big conferences in, and that is what keeps all the hotels going. In between, they have to fill their rooms as well with smaller conference, and that is the sales and marketing of the hotel itself, and that's where the big brands come in with a global reach to fill these periods in between big conferences.
All right, excellent, thank you. Let's go to Franz.
Hello.
You are born and bred in SA?
No, I was born in Austria. I came to South Africa at the very young age of 7. Grew up on the east of Johannesburg, the blue-collar working area. Qualified as a chartered accountant, so I know how to add to 10 quite quickly, and got into the hotel business by accident.
Okay. Your company has a very diverse portfolio. You have a from number of businesses.
Yes, our group comprises mainly 3 divisions. We are property investors in shopping centers, office buildings, warehouses, and one of our divisions owns and manages a small portfolio of 10 hotels, some boutique hotels, and then also services division where we do things like project management, security, cleaning, that type of thing.
All right. The question then, how your business doing? That means you right now in quite a difficult position. That means we're talking about the political instability, economic. BBC called it economic crisis. I don't see crisis on the street, but I'm sure there is a lot behind the scenes, and the currency devaluation, rising interest rates, and of course, like every African continent, deals with unpleasantries like corruption, things like what makes our life quite easier. How does this instability and this kind of a hardship influences investor confidence, and can you see this happening then specifically in the hospitality industry? Does this investor confidence drop actually carries on to visiting tourists who come to see our countries. How do you see that? What is the impact?
Well, South Africa is in a very unique position that it's a beautiful country. The 2010 World Cup certainly promoted our country, and the tourist numbers in South Africa particularly have been on the rise for the past couple of years. So the tourist arrivals are improving, some airlines are increasing their flights, but in South Africa, and in particular our kind of portfolio, we're more oriented towards business and conferences. When business stagnates, one of the items that gets scratched off their budget can be conferences. Government also, who are big clients of ours, scale down or postpone conferences. But one thing one learns on the African continent, and also particularly South Africa, a kind of a can-do attitude that South African business people have, who manage to make profits, and sometimes very good profits, where others don't. And I think that perhaps has been the largest challenge for some of the international hotel operators, to getting used to a South African climate, different cultures, different work ethic, schooling and education, literacy, skills levels. All those things are somewhat different in Africa. But once one understands the cultures, education levels, different people working together from different parts, one can create certainly good harmony amongst the workforce. And of course, ultimately, it's not whether the manager or the owner or the CEO is very clever. It's about a whole lot of good people have to do work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to make a hotel successful. And one of our divisions is coaching and training, executive coaching and training. And we believe in a team-based organization, so therefore we understand and we know and we acknowledge that the people on the ground make a hotel happen.
But can you see the confidence in investors from outside? Do they ask you the questions? Are you guys okay? Is it safe me to come and invest, or at least explore the possibilities?
From an international perspective, it is of course challenging. In South Africa, there are security issues, things like hijackings, armed robberies, and so forth. And in South Africa and other parts of Africa, Nigeria at the moment, when your currency is under pressure, an international investor doesn't really care about your culture or your religion or whatever politics you have. An international investor wants one thing only, that's the return on his investment. And if that return on investment is being challenged by currency depreciation or political uncertainty, of course, they could take a harder look at the investment. They might raise the investment criteria, i.e. add a premium to what is normally required in a hard currency country. Once you raise the bar on investment criteria, it places or puts many potential developments out of the reach of the investor.
All right, excellent.
Sorry to interrupt you, gentlemen, but our fourth panelist has arrived, Vere. So,
yes, only lady.
Vere Shaba from the Green Building Council. Please welcome on stage. Maybe you could update.
I've been waiting for you. And of course, I saved my seat. Oh, your seat. Yeah. All right. You will be coming up. All right, Zinon. You are architect designer, and you are in kind of a unique positions. That means if I come from Europe. I come from a small place as Estonia. Nobody knows it. It's 1 million people. Nobody thinks there is a hospitality guy comes from Estonia. South Africa is well known for many reasons, but not necessarily architectural. It's not necessarily something what, all the best architects come from SA. You get yourself out and you have offices in Dubai, in Lisbon, you covering the 3 major continents. I want to ask you questions. That is, having experience, grown from SA, moving, of course, to the hotspots where things are happening. How do you compare these markets, and how much kind of parallels you can you can take from these markets where you work in. You took your experience from SA to the rest of the world. Are you start bringing experience back now?
Just in brief, yes, that is our intention, but we've been in the fortunate opportunity that we've worked for some key South African developers and operators who've had the big vision to go beyond the local resorts, and throughout Mauritius, Seychelles, and South Africa itself had made some pioneering moves to put South Africa on the resort map. And that kind of experience has allowed us to grow into areas like Dubai, and through relationships with established operators has got us into Europe as well, where we've cemented our position and expanded on that to add value where we can. Where we come to the difference between the regions, we've got three very diverse regions. The first in Europe is a very established environment where you've got a mature operator, they do invest in their properties, and it's a stable environment. In Europe on its own doesn't need much market to attract a stable tourist industry. The Middle East just grew in the last 20 years. It went from zero to hero, and they do everything bigger and better than the rest. So that is a different approach on hospitality, especially on the resorts, which is what got us into the Middle East in the first place. But we find now that as it expands, our Dubai office is doing more work outside Dubai than it is inside. So it just shows how that market has grown to the surrounding areas. When we come to Africa, you just got to look at all the press releases, all the established operators are looking towards the developing markets, and Africa is definitely one of them. So it is a different market, and we're all trying to find our feet throughout Central and Northern Africa. The Southern Africa bits we understand, and we've been exposed to those. So we do find a different approach, but fundamentally the operators want a good product, and the developers want something that they'll receive adequate return on.
But have you had anything, working in Dubai or working in the Middle East or Europe? Have you ever had a instance when the owner comes back to you and says, show me something African, make it something, what's African? Yeah.
Well, funny enough, we find in the resorts are very highly themed. So people like to capture a bit of the essence of the country in that. For example, Dubai. Dubai is 50, 60 years old. It's not an established country. Well, it is established in its own right. But we found that one of our projects was the Medina Gmeiner Hotel. And we found that, the vision of Sheikh Mohammed at that stage was to recapture the essence of Arabia. And you couldn't really find it in Dubai other than certain isolated areas. But through a new project, we recreated the mysticism that led to the essence of the experience. We obviously, in South Africa, we've got the lodges. We've got South Africa and Africa, you've got the lodges. You've got your operators who know what particular service and experience they want to deliver. And we do guide them in realizing that.
All right. Okay, now we get to you. You're the latest one. But we've been talking about operations, big hotel brands. We've been talking about developments, the hurdles, what happenings in how easy or how hard it is to develop a hotel or real estate. We're talking about architecture, design, but you are all out green. How that fits into the investment agenda? Where do you stand?
Okay, so just to introduce myself, I am Vere Shaba, and I'm the director of Shaba and Ramplin Green Building Solutions. And my most notable project is I was the lead Green Star accredited professional for Newtown Junction, which ended up winning 3 SAPO awards, including one for overall winner. And I've also been really fortunate to have traveled across the African continent to help to develop the green building rating tools. So the first thing is, in terms of green, a lot of the times people think about the environment or that it costs more. And that's not really the case. The idea behind green is resilience. So when you look at the return on investment, if you have a green hotel, that means a hotel that is efficient. It means that you are saving on operational costs, which means that your profitability of your hotel is that much better. So what I've seen in terms of the green priority for hotels is that those hotels that are energy efficient and also energy secure, and those hotels that are comfortable, and those hotels that are water efficient and water secure, those are the hotels that clients want to go to. Those are the hotels that investors want to invest in. And so I believe that a lot of the times we've kind of separated it. We've said, here's an eco hotel and here's a hotel. But in fact, I think that all hotels should really be eco hotels. They should actually decrease in terms of their usage, in terms of energy, and in terms of water. So that's something that I've seen in terms of the green priority for hotels is if they're energy efficient, water efficient, if they use sustainable materials, and also if they start looking at how they're getting community development in place. So for instance, there's a lot of staff that are required in hotels. How are you empowering the community that your hotel is in and allowing that indigenous flavor to come into your hotel? I think those are the hotels that more and more people are starting to look for when it comes to the hospitality industry.
Do you think we have a problem with definition? I mean, if we call it green hotel, it sounds expensive, and it sounds kind of I don't know if I can afford that. But if you call it smart hotel, do you think we have a definition where we still haven't converted the green, efficient, economically friendly into the finances enough?
I think so. I think that for too long, people have kind of spoken about green and they've made it seem that it's all about the environment and that it has a cost premium. When in fact, like what you said, if we had to call it a smart hotel, that is what a green hotel is. It's a smart hotel. It's a hotel that has occupancy sensors. So when I walk into a space, then the different systems come on. It's a hotel where the lifts, for instance, have regenerative braking, which means that you save 30% energy on your lifts. And that's a smart hotel. So I do think so. I think that we've been defining it wrong and that hotels should be green. That should be how it should work. And then just to add to that, so I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Hotel Vere in Cape Town. That hotel is the first LEED Platinum rated hotel in the world, and their prices are the same region as other hotels. So their prices for a night range from 1,500 to 1,900 for their deluxe suite. And that's the similar priced hotel, yet they are sustainable and they're green. And they also have, they have solar panels on the rooftop and they've gone through that whole process. So it's not really, it doesn't make a difference. I think for me, the more we carry on, especially in terms of resilience, more and more people are going to be wanting to be moving or staying at a smart hotel, which I think is a new term we've just created now for the rest of the industry, but a smart hotel, a lot more people are going
They call things smart money and smart phones, and everybody wants that. Whatever is smart, everybody wants smart. And maybe it should be called smart. I think what we can do now is maybe open up a little bit as a discussion, and actually, again, 3 o'clock in the morning, putting together some kind of a questions, still half asleep. I would actually like to expand now the green approach into the developments. That means, how does it sit? And let's try to a little bit look at it on a different angle. Let's try to take away the warm and fuzzies. Let's take away the kind of feel-good factor. How the panel sees that being feasible, how that sees being across the board into the developments, existing operations, and end of it, the bottom line on your return on investment, cash operations, profits.
Let me start off with this. Obviously, my territory is very much East Africa and a little bit the Horn of Africa. The challenges that you find as a developer are you landlocked or are you on the sea? Obviously, East Africa, Kenya and Tanzania have a great advantage over this of being on the sea. Uganda, Southern Sudan, Rwanda, in that case, are landlocked. To get a container from Mombasa to Kampala costs you $3,500. To get a container from Mombasa to Kigali costs you $5,800. That is an enormous cost, especially in countries where you have to import quite a lot of things to make your development happen. Lately, the whole of East Africa eitherwise comes out of elections or is going into elections. That means 1 year, 1.5 years lost. Going up to elections, and after that it takes time. When that is over, and it will be over by the end of this year, I see a great future for East Africa. Definitely, all of them have hit oil or gas. The price of the oil not being that good for the moment, but it will get better, and it will help the infrastructure getting into place, which is happening now very, very much. All the countries are investing a hell of a lot of money into infrastructure, which it needs in the end to make a development worthwhile for an investor. That is what I have to see. Sustainability is something that is coming up very, very strongly.
But there is also the questions of the infrastructure and reliability of the infrastructure. Usually you can put a very simply kilowatt hour price, how much power you use in your hotel, but again, if its power is not there, that would be the completely different cost. And then with a long-term investment, solar power would become actually the main source.
Well, we started off with the global brands. That was your first question. How come that they are now eager to get in? I think it is only a good thing for Africa, because for global brands, being green, becoming green, or staying green has become a competitive edge. You can see it in their communication. It comes out very, very strongly how they deal globally, not only in Africa, but globally with this whole issue. And people now make a choice. Who is the winner here? Whom do I go for? Is it Marriott? Is it Intercontinental? Is it Hilton? Who is the greenest of all? And some people feel very strongly about that.
I try to keep the warm and fuzzies out, because we feel good about having a green. All right.
I like the idea, the name SMART, because SMART sounds smarter than green. And in a hotel context, the guest wants to have, as you mentioned, a warm and fuzzy feeling. In Africa and like elsewhere in the world, there's huge upward mobility. When a person can afford to stay in a hotel, he or she wants to feel they have arrived. So therefore, the look and feel of a property is important. But if one plans this properly, and Zinon to my right can expand on that quite a bit, is that the back of a hotel, the back of house is very, very important. So if one looks at energy efficiency, there are many things one can do. Little things that do not cost much money, things like insulation in a roof over the ceiling makes the room much cooler than without insulation. That does not cost much money. Silly things like herb gardens and things like compost, and there are hundreds of things one can do without spending major capex. Things like heat pumps for water heating, solar, and so forth. So in our group, we're really doing some of that. We've made huge investments in heat pump technology, and it is certainly paying some dividends. We're certainly doing the insulation part. We're doing the solar thing. But there's always room for improvement. And I think if one works smart, one can do the green thing without having to cost the necessary green cost. And of course, the other advantage with things like solar and even the PV photovoltaic, the prices are coming down rapidly. So I think the payback or the return on investment on the so-called energy savings technologies are huge. Low energy lights and those kind of things. The LED technology is improving rapidly and costs are coming down. So in the hospitality trade, one can do wonderful things by being very careful, planning carefully, executing carefully, having proper maintenance and preventative maintenance plans to do all these things, and also sometimes replacement budgets. Throw out the old globes, the 100-watt kind of things, and do something else and whatnot. So many different ways, if one operates cleverly, how one can do green and smart all wrapped into one.
I can give you from my own experience designing the hotel, or actually refitting the hotel, switching off the lights in the morning and switching them on in the evening. Let's forget about what kind of lights we had, but the simple switch what comes on when the sun comes up and switches off the lights, and then does the opposite on when it gets dark. That means it saves the manpower, and you saves a lot of energy, because 1 hour all the lights in your resort being on would cost you a lot of money, what you don't see.
Just one last comment. We're actually in the planning phases now of taking one of our resorts completely off-grid. We're not there yet, but in that next year or two, we want to take it off-grid. So it's a 100-bedroom mountain resort hotel, and when that happens, I'll be very happy.
We just find in Africa, you got to tend to be a little more self-sufficient because of the lack of reliability of some of the services. So we found that we've just completed Torres Rani in Mozambique, and we found that, inadvertently it's quite green because you've got to be as self-sufficient as you can. But coming back to your initial statement, I like this smart is an effective word, although I think green, people like to think that they are saving the planet. And by using the word green, they feel that they are doing something in reducing carbon emissions at the end of the day. And a lot of operators, we found, are using it as a marketing tool, okay, to show that they are doing their bit, to save the planet. Now, the smart comes into it, and we're quite confident that even Green Building Council of South Africa, you could achieve, just with intelligent design, you can achieve almost 4 stars, a 4-star rating, by just designing correctly, using correct installation, correct materials, orientating the building, etc. The rest of it is pretty straightforward. It's you're already expanding energy on the building. You've got to recoup that energy in different ways. Whether it's harvesting rainwater as grey water for irrigation, etc. There are a whole list of things, and we work together with consultants to give our clients a checklist. That it's just a simple tick box where they say what they can do and what they're prepared to do, and you can get a rough indication of what kind of rating you can get if you go that way. So for us, it's critical, it's the right thing to do, and we feel that people are not using it as much as a marketing tool as they should.
I love what you said about Mozambique, because I was in Mozambique for holiday. And when I was there, the lights just went off. Like the power in the whole hotel that I was in went off. Trust me, I'm probably not going to go to that hotel again at all. And I think that that's the biggest thing to talk about resilience. And that is the smart green hotel is about resilience. And I think to add on to what was said, the idea of green is that it performs. That's what a green building is. It's a building that actually performs well. So now some of the consultants, for instance, like how you would simulate a car just to see the aerodynamic performance, now we actually get buildings and we put them into software and we simulate how those buildings would perform so that you can do things like the photosensor lights where they switch off when there's a lot of daylight. You can do those kind of things because you now simulate how the building should operate. So I do think that it does make sense in terms of the green agenda and the green priority. I think what has been the biggest problem is that green has always been a line item, an additional line item, when actually it should be integrated in the different disciplines. So in your professional team...
It needs to be on a feasibility study.
Exactly.
To not study simply rates and market, but there should be what's available.
Exactly. So like the electrical engineer, let's say this is a new building, a new hotel, the electrical engineer should actually integrate green in his design. It's not an extra line item that now a green building consultant comes and adds on. They should actually already integrate the different green principles, like the good lighting fittings, like even your occupancy sensors. They should integrate that into the design. And I think that more and more investors should actually start asking the questions. They should ask the professional team, what green principles have you put into the hotel design that you're designing for me? And then for existing buildings, that can still be done. You can still be sustainable or smart, because that's now the new term going forward. You can still be smart with existing buildings where you just now look at your operations. Back of house is so important because that's where a lot of wastage happens and that's where your profit is going. It's back of house. And I think that that's something to look at in terms of green.
Yeah, I think our audience over here is one way or another with the developments or running hotels or in the business. I think we need to get that kind of into the mainstream where green is what sells. The smart is how we make our money. And I think once we start looking at the different objections, it will be then one of the major items in the feasibility studies when we start off our projects. And if we follow that, I think it's going to be a lot easier sale as well to the financiers, to the hotel owners, to everybody else. But yes, Marriott still will sell the green room and ask a premium. And there is nothing wrong with it, as long as they can back it up. All right, thank you. Now let's talk about a little bit on African market. I mean, Africa, a lot of us been working on the different parts of Africa, and Africa is big. It's huge. We're looking at the east, sub-Saharan, west, the north, everywhere else. We seen in the last decade, or actually quite a long time, a lot of ups and downs in African economies. We've been affected by, of course, commodity prices. I mean, so oil was the biggest hit. We had Ebola scare, but all we know it was in somewhere else where we weren't. There was more Ebola in Texas than there was in Tanzania. We also, facing security issues, change of visa regulations. That is where we can't really visit the countries. We can't go right now directly from east to west. That is, this route is basically non-existent. And of course, we have a global economy, downs and ups, what affects. I wanted to ask you, and who wants to take the question, I wanted to ask you, how's that impacting then the region where we work in the hospitality developments and hospitality investments? I mean, how much you encounter every day with what's happening with a continent, with the different risks?
Yeah, we had a little discussion before we came here, and it started off, how do you make a project feasible? Because that's what you want as an owner and as a developer. It starts obviously with the feasibility studies, and in my area where I work, I don't see too many happening. It is, okay, I have the money, I have a plot, let's build a hotel. And the feasibility study is then somehow, getting on a back burner. The next issue we raised is a proper architect. Too many people still build in what they think is a nice hotel, and when it comes to operating and when it comes to finding an international operator globally known, they come then with used list of how a building has to be transformed into what they think is a proper hotel. I leave that in the middle if they are right or not, but it's happening. I think that is happening too much.
In particularly South Africa, there's in part an oversupply of hotel rooms. We said even here in Sandton that post-2010, 2 or 3 hotel operators went bust. Their investments clearly didn't work for them. So if one again takes the warm and fuzzy out of the hotel environment or the hotel investment space, it's a hard decision that gets made by the owner stroke investor. And I don't know about elsewhere in Africa, but in South Africa particularly, the banking industry is very, very scared of the hotel industry for that reason about hotels, big hotel projects having gone bust. So that then leads, of course, to a problem in that how do you capitalize a hotel project that potentially has huge potential? And huge potential, I'm sure, will be everywhere in Africa where there will be certain spots, business hotels or resort hotels that potentially could create very good returns on investments for the developers or the owners, is to find that happy medium of owner equity, bank finance equity, venture capital equity, and if one were to find some kind of access to some funding agency, perhaps World Bank or Development Bank, to support that, because one thing that we all know about the hospitality trade, it is a very labor intensive, therefore it's a huge job creator, and also because particularly at the lower level of the hospitality trade, it's quite often not high skilled jobs. So therefore a person can be trained who perhaps comes from a village, perhaps a semi-literate or partially, and in some cases in our group, illiterate people who work in the properties, and despite being illiterate, producing great caliber of workmanship. So therefore, the hospitality trade could and should be a great enabler of economic growth and job creation. But in my view, the gap is how do you fund those projects?
You want to go?
Funny you should speak to a designer about funding projects, but we found, especially in Africa, that Africa is growing, there's no doubt about it, and we're looking at hotels in lots of weird and wonderful areas that are off the beaten track, because especially business hotels, there's a need to get people around Africa, and people have to stay when they go and conduct business in certain areas. As Dirk says, the commodity prices have, unbalanced the market a bit. But I must again emphasize that the way you approach it has to be done the right way. We are looking at just under half a dozen resort hotels, business hotels in Africa, where the owners, owner investors have gone ahead and started building a hotel. They've completed structure. And then they get operators in to have a look at it, and it's established operators, because we all know that that does carry a bit of weight. And they almost have to redesign it. So it's doing it properly the first time is very important. I can't emphasize the importance of doing the groundwork, before you go ahead. It might take a bit longer, but at the end of the day, it does save a bit of money.
I'll just add just the last thing to what he said. I think the feasibility study is also important in terms of establishing the site and in terms of the urban corridor, because there's no point having a hotel in a space where there isn't the economic traction for people to actually be in that space, because that's when the hotels end up going under. And what we've seen a lot in the space that I'm in is a lot of people are now refurbishing existing hotels which are in the perfect part of town. But instead of now building at a new site, they're actually just using a previously developed hotel or any property that they found in a specific area, and they're refurbishing that. And I think that that's something that's helping a lot in terms of the volatility of the economy across sub-Saharan Africa.
Yes, absolutely.
I'd like to add something we've forgotten, which is obviously the backbone of the hospitality, which is the manpower. That's what makes a hotel, that what breaks it. In East Africa, Kenya is obviously the front runner in having a Yutali hotel school, which is now spreading its employees all over East Africa. Rwanda is following by setting up a hotel school as well. Uganda will follow, because they know tourism, hospitality industry is in the top 3 earners in the country in regards to foreign exchange. So we should not forget that whenever we set up a hotel, we make sure that this manpower issue is properly handled. That is maybe one of the reasons as well that global hotels are coming in, because they are seen as a kind of hotel school within the city that they're going to operate, that they come in with proper systems and systems that will work in the end and that will spread all over the country by turnover.
But let's a little bit expand that. And I mean, if we talk about you know, when we start in a project, when we have an idea, when we want to develop something, that means we know it's not the simplest place to work in, because at the end of the day, it is an emerging market. It develops, but the space is depending on where you are. Some places faster, some places slower. Major question always goes the funds. That means if I'm an African a developer, I want to build a hotel, I have a good idea, or at least I think I have a good idea, and I know the local environment, and you know, you can probably kind of wing it and say, I can get away with a lot of stuff because I know stuff. But always they're going to bring out the questions about the funding, the limited funds. And if you go to the development funds or international funds, they're going to ask you exactly the questions. What are the risks? Please identify the risks. And you know, most of the risk, what's been identified, just give me the funds and build the hotel. Now, the secondary risk, or down the list, or third, or whatever they come to, it becomes the infrastructure, the skill sets, the caps, what we have on the market, what actually is not directly related to our industries. Where do you see that? Where do you see that going? And do they supposed to be in a level 1 or at least in top 3, saying skills, infrastructure? Where do you stand?
Skills are obviously important. Money as well to find it. But banks are asking 30 to 40% equity. That is very common, which is in a big project obviously a lot of money. I think you have to do it step by step. Yeah, if you can raise the 30-40%, I would imagine that the manpower will follow as well. But you have to work on it. You should not put it somewhere at the back. It is becoming very, very important to stay competitive that you have proper staff.
I just wanted to quickly say, there was I had a client who wanted to have Italian marble laid on a lobby with thousands of square foot, but the marble layer had a steel hammer, and that was his main tool, and therefore we needed to buy tools, teach the marble layer, and then we could at least consider buying the expensive marble. What comes first?
Obviously the marble comes first, because without marble you can't open your hotel. Should it be marble is something else. But yes, it's the egg and the chicken.
Point of the story is we bought no marble.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, that's not going to happen. Sorry.
Yeah, what's your question here then?
Yes, that means finance on the top. Where should be the skill sets, where should be the infrastructure, and what else can we mention, what is going to be very high level in the feasibility studies when we're looking at the projects in Africa?
Well, first of all, you need an enabling government that understands that hospitality is important to their economy, and it's a huge enabler for job creation, which again turns the economy even further. Not all governments understand this. It's also important for a developing economy to understand the need to allow expats to work there. In some countries in Africa, there is a problem. Our group has previously operated in Swaziland and Lesotho. Those governments do not understand the value of expat skills, and work permits become quite an issue. We've had some of our managers jailed because their work permits had expired and nonsense like that. So therefore, to put it in summary, you need a government that understands and is willing and eager to support the hospitality trade. Then, that's my top on the list. Second one is, without funding or capital, no project will fly. No matter how good it is, no matter how eager the developers and other investors are. So funding stroke capital is critical. Again, the government should be the enabler. There should be some development funding, maybe as a first year to assist with raising the equity portion and so forth. And of course then the third item is skills. Again, government must have a hand in this, i.e. training colleges, hospitality, universities, hospitality, training campuses, legislation that somehow encourages hotels to have trainees. Not all hoteliers believe in the trainee system. They all want all qualified and skilled people. A good hotelier will know the European kind of concept that you need to staff a portion of your hotel staff complement with trainees. And they don't come there with being trained, they are to be trained. So therefore, that's a big difference. And if the hotelier and the government understand that people need to be trained, sometimes there's a cultural issues in terms of, in South Africa, who greets first. In an African culture, it's the opposite way to the Western culture. Now, unless you know this, you're going to do the wrong thing, and so forth. So, to recap, it is government enthusiasm and support, capital, and skill set.
Which is what we need to create a memorable product. Once we have those three things, we can put it all together. And again, you know, in terms of working in different parts of the world, we'd like to think that we understand what the operators want. And again, by putting the correct people together, we can make it a seamless experience to try and capture that. Because yes, service, finance, all that is very important, but at the end of the day, you create an experience. And the experience comes through the tangible and through the service industry.
I think them as, if we're talking about the infrastructure is absolutely essential on any development. If you can have a 5-star hotel in the middle of a bush, but if there is no road or electricity, the business case probably will go out of the window. And as I think it's for your side, it's putting the money and feasibility back into what we don't have, but what we can provide.
Exactly. I think that the important thing is definitely the funding. I think that funding comes first. Without the money to actually outwork the vision, we don't really have an experience, or we don't really have a hotel. And just recently, I had one of the Mauritian-based property developers come to me because one of their investors, an international investor, and also here in South Africa, a government investor, had said, we want to finance you, but what is your ESG strategy? So what is your environmental, social, and governance strategy as a business? And so now they needed to write up an ESG report. And I think the biggest take home that I got from that, especially in terms of accessing funding, is that the reason they asked for that is really because they see it as the resilience of it. So if you've thought about things like the environment, because when you think about that, you think about what is the bulk infrastructure available in the environment or on that site. So would we need to now start building like, for instance, I know in Nigeria where they have the black water treatment because the sewage system is not as sophisticated for certain areas. So things like that are going to have an impact on the initial capital cost that's going to be spent on actually creating and building the hotel. So they looked at the environmental side in terms of what infrastructure is available in that area and what impact will you have on it. Then they looked at the social side. So what jobs are you going to create? And also the risks. So we've seen that when there's a lot of inequality in certain instances, then there's a lot of conflict and a bit of almost unrest in certain areas. So they look at things like that. So what impact will you have to the social side? And then governance is how are you actually making decisions as a board within the property development company? So are you doing your due diligence in terms of the people you have on your team, in terms of what you're doing with the finances that are coming in, and also looking at things like King 2 and all of that. So after actually writing the ESG report for the property developer, they managed to then sit with the client again and say, this is what we have. So we've thought around all the things that will make sure that this hotel is still operational and still running 10 years down the line. Because I think hotels, they don't just have a 5-year life cycle. You preferably want the hotel to be there for more than 10 years at the very minimum. So that's something that they looked at. So they looked at
management contract, it starts from 25 years. I mean, that's where your asset needs to be maintaining certain level.
Exactly. So in terms of the ESG report, that's why they had to look at that to see how, like, once they invest in this hotel, will still be there 25 years down the line and actually making a profit and not just a dilapidated hotel in the middle of nowhere now. So they looked at that.
I think we brought out some interesting points over here now. Enabling environment. The governments, how they let us to get on with our job and where the priorities lie. And we see a lot of it, we talked about how much money it brings into the country's welfare. I mean, is the major factor what brings in the foreign currency. A lot of countries rely on this foreign currency earnings, and there is a benefits always two ways, where it goes direct and indirect. That means how many jobs we directly creating, but how much actually goes indirect to all over the economy. We see throughout the governments tourism being promoted heavily. That means we see advertisements in the CNN. That means I can be in Washington, D.C., and I can be watching a basketball game or go to Sunderland and watch the football game, and I see Tanzania, Kenya, Cape Town wineries, and that brings people, gives the interest to the people, right? And it seems like we have prioritized tourism. Where does a hospitality stand? My personal feeling, and it's not about me, but for you guys, but my personal feeling is we're separating, we're segregating tourism, what has been very highly regarded, been highly brought up throughout the world, but the hospitality and development of hospitality, it's been kind of left behind. What's your feelings about it?
Yeah, you mentioned the word hospitality and tourism. I think hospitality covers more. Tourism is the person who comes and goes up country and has a holiday. Most of the business, though, is business related, business hotels and yeah, one should not call them tourists. I think that their boss would not like it if they come back as a tourist. So it is extremely important that we see where do we put a hotel and what market do we really want to go after. Is it the tourism market or the real business hotel, which are two different infrastructures?
Absolutely. Tourism can be seen as the tourist coming on a holiday or a sightseeing. But hospitality, particularly in Africa, the hotel industry relies very heavily on the business traveler. But in terms of getting back to the enabling part, it's, yes, we've all seen the beautiful CNN TV commercials about come to this country, come to that country, and they show you beautiful, wonderful scenery. It's fantastic. The hotel owner stroke operator needs to have a return on his investment. And again, government can be the enabler. Just off the top of my head, a couple of simple things that can happen. All governments own large tracts of land. In Africa, land ownership and identifying who the owner is a major problem. In South Africa, we have a land register, property register, so and the owner of a piece of property or land can be identified. And it's one of the best systems in the world in South Africa, which we're very proud of. In other parts of Africa, they have leasehold systems. In some parts, I've heard of horror stories of developers thinking they're dealing with an owner of a property, and then they find out halfway through the project that actually the owner is not the owner. So that the enabling must come from government in terms of access to land, the plot of land, by some kind of a leasehold or something. If government were to provide a lease for a hotel operator to develop a piece of or real estate on top of that land, i.e. at a $1 a year kind of leasehold for 50 years and so forth, all of a sudden the enabling element is there. If there are tax incentives, another enabling element. So when governments could become major enablers without having to necessarily fund or actually spend money on it. They already have the capital via the land. So there are many things that can happen to enable this hospitality stroke tourism development. Right now there's the disconnect. Beautiful picture and no hotel.
Absolutely true.
On our side, as Dirk says, a lot of the hospitality is in country. People have to travel around, they have to do business, and you've got to make sure the industry is alive and can facilitate that. And we found recently that there's a need for 2 and 3 star hotels, because the operators tell us that
hospitality we can consider as a concept, because hospitality element is in the airline industry. Hospitality
Yes.
element is in the transportation industry. Hospitality element, very simply, is actually in a police force, not to lock people up, but actually guide them to somewhere. That means there is a hospitality element in everywhere, but how they are being segregated, in my opinion, from tourism and what we do developments and what we need to do.
My definition of hospitality is making someone feel comfortable in an environment that's not his home, whether it be locally, internationally, whatever it is. And it's across the board. Not everyone is a 5-star person with, as we say, these exotic destinations all over the world.
Interestingly enough, all the 5-star people coming from somewhere. Today's backpacker, today's millennial travels around with a computer, becomes a millionaire in 5 years down the line.
One of the growing industries is the 1 and 2 star. And in Europe, they've got an established bed and breakfast environment. Okay, and the 1 and 2 star, you have your corporates who need a repair person to go to service something in the Free State for a day. They need to put him up in a reasonable place that's not going to cost them an arm and a leg, that still makes it feasible for them to spread their service range through the country. So for us, we must not neglect that.
Yeah. That is a decent rotation. I think we're running out of time. I would love to see if there's anybody has any comments or any questions to throw out. Can we have a few questions? Excellent. Or if you want to argue, I like the arguments.
Good morning. My name is Pelisa Mangu. I'm coming from the city of Johannesburg, municipality, Joburg Tourism. First, I would like to provide an answer to your last question about the separation between hospitality and tourism. I always feel that people want to separate the two, yet they should not be separated, because hospitality forms the infrastructure. You go to a place, you come to Johannesburg, you will need a hotel. That is the infrastructure, that part of the infrastructure of tourism. You will need a restaurant. So the two we cannot promote a destination without talking about the standard of the hotels that we have or the number of rooms that we have as a destination. It forms part of the package. You can't separate it. So maybe some destinations make that mistake of just highlighting the attractions. They can't separate it. The hospitality forms part of it. When we talk about when we talk about Johannesburg and 5-star hotels in Johannesburg, we're promoting the destination. That's one. And then my question is, I'm a supporter of, okay, let me go back a little bit. In South Africa, tourism has been identified as one of the key pillars for economic growth. It creates jobs, it has the ability to use people who are unskilled and they get skilled. So that is that's the main benefit. Now, what tends to happen, especially when it comes to investment, and particularly hotel investment, is that developers always concentrate in one area. For example, the gentleman in the middle mentioned Sandton. There's a lot of concentration of hotels in Sandton. Yet we should be promoting the spread of tourists to other parts of the city. There's the south, which is close to Soweto. There's the east, there's the west, which should be getting the investment or the development. But what tends to happen is that there's always this concentration. Whereas if there's no concentration, we are not only promoting the destination as a whole, promoting the experience, we are also looking at the sustainability, what the lady has been, the smart development. We are also looking at that. My question is, what is it as government now? What is it that we should be doing to attract the development to these other areas? I mean, it would be good to have a hotel closer to Soweto, where there will be that experience of Soweto, now bringing the indigenous people in, not only concentrating everything in Sandton. Thank you.
All right, who would like to take?
Thanks for the question. As an investor and as an operator, I'm keen to answer this. Very early on in my property career, which spans 26 years, I was taught one principle of property investment, and they call that the 3 Ps. And that is position, position, position. So therefore, the hard reality always is an investor would want to do a development, be it a hospitality or any other kind of property development, based on demand. So therefore, as much as a hotel operator would love to build a beautiful hotel in and around Soweto, they would do this provided there's demand. As it so happens, there's a beautiful hotel in Soweto, I think it's near Velakazi Street. And in the initial years, that operator, I know the lady personally, had great difficulty making a return on her investment together with the Investec bank funding. So again, to answer your question, any hotel operator would love to put up a hotel anywhere, provided the position question is answered and provided there's a reasonable return on investment, and equally so the funders. So right now in the Johannesburg context is that from a marketing perspective, international tourists are advised to stay away from what are perceived to be dangerous areas, i.e. CBD areas. In Johannesburg CBD, the old CBD, we have at least a dozen beautiful hotels, erstwhile 5-star hotels that are currently shut down, and a number of other hotels. There's a sign of life in Braamfontein where the area is coming back onto its own. And then, of course, a business traveler would like to stay near his meeting place, a banker and business meetings. And as it so happens, Sandton has become the business center of South Africa, and therefore the hotel operators would follow suit, which means they pitch their tent in proverbial Sandton because that's where the business is. If they were to stay in a hotel in Soweto, as an example, just the daily traffic congestion, the traveling time to move from Soweto to Sandton would make it not feasible to stay there. And those are the real challenges. Zinon alluded to having hotels in off the beaten track places. The fact is sometimes a hotel operator would want to put up a 2 or 2.5-star hotel in a mining town. No tourist will ever come there, but people who are service providers and operators and contractors and mine workers would want to stay there short-term and long-term because they're actually digging some metals or minerals out of the ground. And yes, that hotel or motel or or hospitality operation might only have a lifespan of 15 to 20 years, but for the duration of that lifespan, that operator will make a lot of money. So once again, position is not only linked to exotic position is linked to where the customers are.
And I think that to overcome the problem of position, what the city of Johannesburg should look into then is their transportation infrastructure and the links between that. Because, like what you had mentioned, if you have the hotel in Soweto, that's fine. But if you look at Sandton, I'm able to go from OR Tambo International Airport straight to Sandton without even leaving the building. Because you hop into a Gautrain, the Gautrain would take you to Sandton. When you get to Sandton, there are taxis and there's cabs and there's Uber outside the Sandton Gautrain station. And from there, I can go to my destination. And then the next day, when I need to go to the office or to my meeting, I can walk there. And I think that's the thing. So in terms of getting hotels in other parts of the city, one of the things to look at would be gentrification, or basically the opposite of urban decay. So just an example is recently City Lodge. They opened a hotel in Newtown. And most people would not really think of having a hotel in Newtown, but they did it, and they concentrated it next to the offices, next to the retail, and next to that hub, which has now been reactivated and regenerated within the Newtown area, which formerly was just the parking lot opposite Mary Fitzgerald or near the Market Theatre. So I think that's the thing, when you have mixed-use precincts and you have the connectivity between the different spaces. That's when you also, the more people who are there, the less crime there would be, the more policing there is, and then that just starts to link the different areas so that we can have a 5-star hotel in Soweto.
I think it's a simple how cross-sector interacts to each other. If the airline company wants to fly to, let's say, Uganda, they're going to ask you, can I have an airport, please? And if they're bringing in the people, they're going to ask, can I have a road, please? If you build a hotel, the hotel says, can I please have an infrastructure, road, electricity, water, and some incentives, what makes that happen. I think there is a cross-sector interaction, and at the end of the day, if you invite people to visit the country, you need to have the cross-sector on the table because they all contribute to each other. And therefore, you can have the growth on the tourism industry, you have a flourishing hospitality industry, banking system, telecommunications, finance, you name it follows around. I think it's the answer for the bigger question. It's not the answer, but it's a concept what needs to be probably looked at.
It's not in isolation, it's all about partnerships. It's the council working with developers and giving them incentives. You know, the Maboneng area in Johannesburg CBD is a classic success story where a lot of work has been done to reintroduce people into that area, and I find it unique and different. And slowly those areas are going to pick up the tourist industry. But I think it's got to be a partnership, and the council or government has to compromise in certain areas to have incentives for people to reinvigorate.
But incentives not necessarily doesn't mean give us a tax breaks or give us something. Incentives could potentially
it's a combination.
It's a combination. Give us a road, right? Give us something.
As the lady said, infrastructure is everything. It's from your restaurant to your taxi cab to your services.
All right, anybody else?
I have a question. Last question. So, Dirk, I'll direct it to you. I'm asking this question on behalf of a lot of people that I've met in the last 2 months in Africa, ranging from Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Zambia, Seychelles. We have a lot of people here. So this is about investments. There is land. There are people who've done projects before, but there is no funds coming in. But on the other hand, I speak to a lot of fund managers in the West, in US, Canada, and UK, our partners. The feeling I get is there is more funds available for Africa in the real estate space itself. But what's a bankable project now? It differs, the opinion differs from one to other. So I'd like to understand what is a bankable project, because we have right here in this room over close to $1 billion requirement that is available. But I feel the money is not coming through so easily. And when we try to understand more, it's all about the feasibility study that you guys have been talking about. It's about whether the project is bankable or not. So what is a bankable project?
I think, can I just and I hand it over to you straight away. Money, I've never seen the problem being a finance. I mean, you know, finance is always been there, down there or not down there. There is just the different sources where the funds are coming from. It is how you're going to get the money back. Any business, what we do, is based on a return and the risk what you take. As long as any development that has nothing to do with Africa, has exactly the same criteria based on any development proposals from New York, London, Paris, you name it where it is what are the risks, what are the feasibility, how you get the return back. And even better, what we have in Africa is we have a potential to expand. A lot of places you can't expand anymore. If you build a hotel in London, there is probably not going to be any other plot available for 20 years. Here we have. But that's my take. That is, we haven't changed the rules here. The rules are always been the same, and the funds are always available for investment. What makes it feasible?
Yeah, to answer your question, for over a year there, and it's still happening there is a shortage of foreign currency in East Africa. And you can feel that as a developer and as an investor. Because of that, and I would imagine that happens because of that, is that there are now European companies coming into East Africa with money. The advantage over these European companies is that the period they give the money for is much longer. East Africa has a tendency to stick to 10 years and definitely not go beyond that. Interest rate is very high. The European financing comes in for a much longer period and at a much lower rate. So yes, you know, to make a choice is not very difficult. But this is only happening since a very few months, the way we experience it. And that is a positive development, because it means that Africa is now globally getting onto the market. It's not only with a few people that know how Africa is and let's do business there and keep it that way and not mention it too much to the outside world, but there is interest into Africa from Europe, from the US, on a much longer time frame and at a much lower interest rate. However, your product has to be viable, like any project.
Are we saying it's a question of somebody planning it so well for the investments to come in? It's a matter of somebody putting up a good plan. Is that all it is? Are we missing that?
Yes. Here we go. We get an answer from audience.
My question is, are we missing just that?
No. Anybody wants to comment?
It's a huge factor. As Zinon stated, is that the interest is there. Where's the information? You have to put together a total package. The information, you have to have government as a partner. Your panel has been absolutely excellent.
Thank you, sir.
They're experts. They know what they're doing. But it has to be a total package. It's very, very frustrating when I have, investors call and say, we want to invest in Africa. And I say, well, where? And they say Africa, not realizing it's 54 countries. So a lot of people outside of the continent you have to also educate them about Africa, number one. And then number two, it's also about the business. It's not only about the hotel. People have money. As the gentleman on the continent to do the extra step. And, somebody's going to have to do the feasibility study. People say, Mike, hey, find me good projects. But I call, I send emails, et cetera, to investment, trade, development ministries. I get no return call back. I get no email back. So, no problem. No harm, no foul. But you cannot sit here and say, we need money, we need money, we need money. And then I have investors on the other side saying, we have funds, but nobody's talking to each other.
That's exactly what I'm asking.
So that's the problem. And until that gets fixed, we'll be going here and doing the same thing to another. People get tired.
I think there was
Let's do business.
There was a movie, and there was a very, very famous quote, show me the money. Money is there, but what you got to show for it?
And until that happens, all the things that have been identified by your excellent panel, government, incentives, people will come. But the initial phase has to start with those here. For example, the young lady's project in Zinon, it could go. But somebody has to develop it. And you have to show an investor. I won't be a 5-star hotel, but a good 2, 3-star. But again, you also have to build something around it. You have to have, we're going to go to Zinon to do what? So you have to have some tourists and something there. But again, an idea without a proper follow-through, because at the end of the day, it's about the money. ROI, period.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I can answer. Thank you. And thank you very much for your positive comments. We'll take the compliment. And between Zinon and I, the architect next to me, skip government. Get your investors to talk to us direct. We will find all the right projects for you that are meeting all the right criteria.
And we also will be green. Yeah. All right. I think we're going to be kicked out. And I really would like to use a coffee now. Thank you, panel. It was absolutely excellent. I'm sorry we're a little bit, we're in the first thing in the morning. It's not the graveyard shift or it's not the kind of a highlight shift, but I think it was absolutely brilliant. Thank you, audience. If you have any last words, or we can just walk away and have a coffee. All right? Oh, sure.
No, Franz was mentioning the 3 Ps. I would like to add another 4 in for doing business in Africa, which is patience, patience, and patience. and the fourth P would be positive cash flow.
Anybody else? All right, excellent. Thank you so much, panel. It was brilliant. I'm sure you guys enjoyed it as well. And we're going to be around if you want to have a discussions about what we do or where we can help you, advise you. You're most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much.